By the time we hauled the last trailer load up the gravel drive, the sun had dropped behind the fir ridge, and the whole valley had gone the color of wet slate. The new place sat outside Nolan Creek, where the logging roads braiding the hills all emptied toward the mill. You could hear loaded log trucks downshifting before dawn from half a mile away, that hard metallic moan bouncing through cut-over stumps and second-growth timber. It wasn't much to look at. A rented farmhouse with peeling white paint, a rust-streaked grain trailer, 2 sagging outbuildings, and pasture that ran into a cedar fence line and then straight into dark trees. But it had room, and room was what we needed. I'm Ray Murray. At that point, I was 42, running a small patch of farm work on leased ground and filling the gaps with mill hauling. Hay on 3 acres behind the house, 42 chickens, 6 head of cattle on a shared lease. 3 nights a week I drove chip truck for Cascade Timber so we could keep up with feed bills, truck payments, and my son's school expenses. The kind of life where if one tire blows at the wrong time, you feel it for 6 months. Routine kept me upright. Feed at 4:45. Check water lines, mineral tubs, fence corners. Coffee in a thermos by 6. Daylight hours split between my place and whoever needed a hand moving equipment or stacking bales. Dusk was for another fence check, lockups, and putting tools where I could grab them in the dark. Sleep hard. Wake at 3:30 on haul nights and roll before traffic. My wife Erin used to joke I ran my life like a pre-trip inspection. She'd stand in the kitchen doorway with her arms folded and say, "You missed item 12, Murray. Human conversation." I'd kiss her, grin, and keep lacing my boots. Our son Caleb was 15 and trying hard to look unimpressed with everything. He wore his hood up, answered in single syllables, and then disappeared to help me anyway, whenever he thought I wasn't paying attention. First night in that house, he hauled boxes in the rain without being asked. That's how I knew he was worried too, even if he wouldn't say it. "Signal out here sucks," he said, standing on the porch and turning his phone in circles. "Good," I said. "Maybe you'll have to read a book." He gave me a look like I'd suggested we churn our own butter. The blue heeler, Juno, settled in faster than any of us. She made 2 loops around the yard, peed on a cedar post, and claimed the back step like she'd owned it for years. Juno had worked cattle with me since she was a pup. She knew coyotes, raccoons, skunks, neighbor dogs, and one mean old boar that used to bust our feeder. She didn't spook easy, and when she barked at something, I listened. That first day, I walked the whole perimeter before dark. Fence wire had old repairs, staples pulling loose, a couple cedar rails starting to rot at ground line. Nothing unexpected for a rental. The drainage ditch along the back had standing water from spring rain, frogs trilling loud enough to sound like bad electrical lines. Beyond that, stump field. Beyond the stump field, a wall of fir and hemlock so thick it swallowed light early. At dinner, Erin asked what I thought. "Needs work," I said. She waited. "It'll do," I added. She nodded like that was as close to optimism as I ever got. By 9:30, Caleb was in his room with headphones on. Erin had one of those home shows playing low in the living room, and I set out clothes for my 3:30 wake-up. Habit. Even on non-haul nights, I laid things out in order. Socks, base layer, work shirt, keys on the same hook. People think routine is dull. Routine is what stands between you and ruin when life slips. I slept fast and deep, the way you do when your body has been moving since before sunrise. I woke to a single yelp. Not a bark, not a howl. One long, sharp cut-off sound from Juno, like somebody had stepped on her chest and squeezed all the air out at once. My eyes snapped open. Red digits on the bedside clock read 12:17. Then silence hit. Not normal midnight quiet. Not country quiet with insects and ditch frogs and distant engines. Silence like somebody had dropped a heavy blanket over the whole property. No frogs, no rustle in the ditch grass, no wind noise in the eaves. Even the refrigerator hum seemed to flatten out. I sat up and listened hard, pulse already climbing. From somewhere out behind the chicken coop came a slow, heavy pacing. 3 steps. Pause. 3 steps. Pause. Wait in it. Deliberate, like something measuring distance. I slid out of bed without turning lights on. Erin stirred. "What is it?" she whispered. "Probably nothing," I said, which is what men say when they already know it's something. At the bedroom window, I lifted the sash an inch. Cold, wet air rolled in, and with it a smell that didn't belong. Canine musk, strong and damp, mixed with a sweet rot stink like meat, left under tarp. Too long. Then I heard claws click on old concrete pavers near the back porch. Click, click, click. Scrape. I froze with one hand on the window frame. The porch light threw a weak yellow cone over the steps, but just beyond that was black. From the black came a low, chuffing exhale, not loud, more felt than heard, and high enough off the ground that every part of my brain that cataloged animal size and position said the same thing at once. "That's not a dog." I shut the window slow, careful not to rattle glass. My mouth had gone dry. Erin was upright now. "Ray?" "Stay with Caleb," I said. "Lock his door. Don't open it unless I tell you." "What is it?" "Maybe a bear," I lied. I grabbed the big flashlight from the dresser, then the 12-gauge from the hall closet. I didn't rack it yet. No reason to wake neighbors over raccoons, I told myself. No reason to make this bigger than it was. In the mudroom, I paused with my hand on the knob and listened again. Nothing. Not even Juno. That scared me worse than the chuff. I stepped onto the porch and swept the beam across the yard. Coop, water trough, tractor shed, nothing moving. My own breath smoked in front of me. Rain mist drifted in the light like dust. "Juno," I called low. "Heel." No answer. I scanned farther along the fence line into the ditch. The cattle were all pressed shoulder to shoulder at the far end of pasture, heads turned toward the same patch of dark by the cedar rails. Cattle do not bunch like that for owls and possums. "Bear," I said out loud, because saying it made it feel manageable. Just a bear push downhill. I walked to the coop, every sense stretched thin. Wire on the southwest corner hung loose, twisted open at one staple like someone had pried it. Feathers and mud, no blood, no tracks I could read in the dark. The pacing had stopped. The yard felt wrong, occupied but empty. After 2 minutes that felt like 30, Juno came slinking out from under the grain trailer, belly low, ears pinned, eyes showing white. She didn't look at me. She looked past me over my shoulder and gave one tiny whine I had never heard from her before. I backed us both to the porch and shut the door. Inside, Erin stared at my face and didn't ask if it was a bear again. By first light, I was in rubber boots with my phone camera out. The ground behind the coop was churned from rain and runoff, but there were prints. Big ones. At first glance, oversized dog tracks, 4 toes, pad, claw marks. Then, as they crossed into deeper mud, the shape changed. The front impressions lengthened, splayed oddly, almost like fingers dragging before the pads set down again. No clean pattern. Just enough detail to make my neck prickle. I took pictures from every angle anyway. At breakfast, Erin kept watching my hands. "You're shaking," she said. "I'm tired." "You work nights and days, Ray. We just moved. You're running on fumes." She was trying to hand me the normal explanation, and I wanted it so badly I almost took it. Lack of sleep. New place noises. Adrenaline making things bigger than they were. Caleb came in and poured cereal. "Juno hid in my room at like 1, he said. "She never does that." I looked at him. "You hear anything else?" He shrugged too fast. "Thought I heard something by the coop. Like scraping." He looked embarrassed saying it. Teenagers hate sounding scared in front of their parents. "Probably raccoon," I said. He nodded and didn't believe me. At the mill that afternoon, I showed 2 guys the photos while we waited for chipload paperwork. Big mistake. Harlan zoomed in, snorted, and said, "Murray, you finally meet one of them Nolan Creek tweakers. Looks like a barefoot man in a dog suit." The other guy laughed so hard coffee came out his nose. "Could be runoff distortion," I said, hearing how weak I sounded. "Could be Bigfoot's poodle," Harlan said. By shift change, half the yard had heard I was hunting werewolves behind my chicken coop. I called county non-emergency anyway. A deputy came out near dusk, did a polite lap around the property, and shined his light at the torn wire like he was checking expiration dates at a grocery store. "Likely cougar pressure," he said. "They spook dogs, test enclosures. Could also be a big stray. You got game cameras?" "Not yet." "Put up lights. Reinforce this corner. Keep pets in at night." I showed him the deeper prints on my phone. He squinted, handed it back. "Mud plays tricks." Then he gave me a look I knew from truck stops and doctor waiting rooms, the look people give when they've decided you're about to tell an internet story and they're trying to leave before they have to be rude. After he pulled out, I stood in the yard with a spool of fence wire and a staple gun, jaw tight enough to hurt. Facts in my hand, nobody willing to name them. By full dark, I had 2 extra motion floods mounted on the back of the house, and one pointed at the coop. Juno refused to cross the porch threshold. I had to carry her to the mudroom, and she shook the entire time. Rain moved in around 10 o'clock. Fine at first, then thick, foggy drizzle that turned the yard into smeared silver under the lights. Erin wanted me in bed. "You've got to run at 3:30, she said. "You can't sit up all night over this." "Just checking things." "You checked things 4 times. 5, I said without thinking. She rubbed her eyes. "Ray," I softened my voice. "Go sleep. I'll be in soon." I sat at the kitchen table with the back blinds cracked 1/2 inch and my flashlight across my lap. Not because I thought I'd see anything, because not watching felt worse. At 11:48, the first motion light tripped by the pasture gate. Nothing in beam. 30 seconds later, the coop light tripped and held. Juno pressed herself under my chair hard enough to bruise my shin. I stood, moved to the mudroom door, and clicked off the kitchen light to cut glare. Through rain-specked glass, the yard looked flat and bright in patches black between. Then I saw them. 2 amber points at the back cedar fence line, level with the top rail. 6 feet up, maybe a little more. Not bobbing like a deer head, not low like coyote, still, perfectly still. I lifted the flashlight and put the beam directly where the eyes were. They blinked sideways, not eyelids closing top to bottom. A nictitating sweep, quick and wrong. Before my brain could file that, the eyes were gone, not dropped out of sight. Gone first, and then, a half beat later, the dark behind them shifted like something had stepped backward into deeper black than the trees should have held. My hand tightened on the light until my knuckles ached. "Ray?" Erin called from the hallway, voice small. She was awake now, hearing the motion floods click and re-click. "Stay there," I said. A shape moved then, fast, crossing between the far flood and the white side of the old grain trailer. For one clean second it was a black silhouette cut against white metal. Shoulders above the trailer tire well, too high, too narrow at the waist. Upright for the first stride, then dropping into a crouched run without losing speed. No bear moved like that. No dog moved like that. It vanished behind the tractor shed, and a second later came one dry sound from the dark. Teeth clicking together once, impatient, like somebody tapping a wrench against steel. Every hair on my arms stood up. I didn't need a deputy or a buddy or a joke to tell me what that meant. Something big, deliberate and hungry, had mapped my yard, tested my wire, and learned where we slept. And it was still out there, just beyond the reach of my lights, waiting for me to make one dumb move. I didn't make one. I backed away from the mudroom glass one step at a time, never turning my back on that patch of dark by the tractor shed, and eased the deadbolt over so slowly it barely clicked. Juno followed me glued to my leg, nails skittering on linoleum, breath fast and shallow. Erin stood in the hallway in one of my old flannels, Caleb behind her. Both of them, reading my face before I said a word. "Everybody in our room," I said. "Now. Quiet." Caleb started to ask a question, saw the shotgun in my hand, and shut his mouth. I posted them in the bedroom, killed the hall light, then went back through the house, checking every window latch like I was doing a pre-trip inspection in a lightning storm. I checked the front door twice. I checked the mudroom twice. I stood at the kitchen sink and stared through the slit in the blinds until my eyes watered. Nothing moved. Nothing. Motion lights clicked off. One by one, and every time one died, I felt like we lost another chunk of ground. At 1:20, I gave up on sleep. At 2:05, I made coffee and didn't taste it. At 3 o'clock, I called dispatch and told them I wasn't making my chip run due to livestock emergency. The silence on the line said they didn't buy it, but they marked me out. At 3:30, I was in rain gear with a tape measure, flashlight, fence pliers, and my phone. I waited for first gray light because I'm stubborn, not stupid. By 5:12, there was enough dawn to read ground. I started at the coop corner, where the wire had been peeled back. Fresh damage, not ripped, peeled. The staple had been levered out and bent sideways, cedar post scarred where something had pried and twisted. I crouched and held my hand against the gouge. 4 parallel cuts sank deep, each one spaced too far apart for a raccoon and too straight for a bear rake. Could be old damage, I muttered to myself. It wasn't old. The exposed wood was pale and wet. I followed sign to the drainage ditch. Mud there held impressions better than the yard. I found 3 clear prints in a staggered line, each one bigger than my palm, with claws that bit deep at the front. Canine, almost. Then 10 feet farther, the trackway smeared into a set of longer impressions where something had planted weight and dragged through soft muck before lifting clean again. The left side had a thumb-like notch, shallow but there. I photographed each one with my knife for scale and set the tape beside them, 7.5 inches across the pad spread. My heel fit inside one toe arc with room left. I stood there in drizzle, phone full of evidence, and heard my own voice in my head sounding like every idiot internet clip I'd ever made fun of. By 6, Erin came out in rubber boots with 2 mugs and stood next to me without speaking. She looked at the prints. She looked at Juno, who refused to step off the concrete and kept staring at the tree line. "Tell me what it is," she said. "I don't know." "What do you think it is?" I gave her the answers in order, because order keeps panic from taking over. Could be black bear with mange. Could be somebody's giant shepherd mix. Could be a person messing around in gear. She stared at the gouged post. A person did that barehanded. Maybe with a tool. I heard it and hated it. By 7:30, I'd called Oregon Fish and Wildlife, county again, and our nearest neighbor, a retired faller named Jensen, who lived down the road with 2 Anatolian shepherds and opinions on everything. Fish and Wildlife took a report, asked if anything was killed, then told me to secure attractants and install cameras. County sent no one this time. Jensen came over in a mud-splattered Polaris, looked at the wire and grunted. "Big cat won't peel wire like that," he said. "Bear might. You'd see pads cleaner than this, though. You got kids? Teenager. Keep 'em in after dark. That all you got?" He squinted into the trees. "I got plenty. You only asked for animal ID." At the mill-scale house around noon, I showed the new photos to a loader operator I trusted, Luis Navarro, who'd hunted elk longer than I'd been driving. He didn't laugh. He zoomed, frowned, and set the phone down careful like it might bite. "That gate spacing is wrong," he said quietly. "Too much stride change." "Meaning what?" "Meaning either your mud's lying or something was switching stance." "Switching from what to what?" He gave me a look. "You want me to say something stupid? I won't." Harlan walked in then, saw my screen and barked. "There he is, Dogman Murray." 2 other guys cracked up. By quitting Bell, someone had taped a cartoon wolf head to my locker with night shift supervisor written under it. I ripped it down and went home with my jaw aching from clenching. That afternoon I bought 2 trail cams, extra SD cards, a brighter handheld spotlight, and another motion flood from the farm store in Nolan Creek. The kid at checkout scanned the cameras and said, "Catching trespassers," with a grin that told me he'd already heard. News in mill towns moved faster than weather. "Catching whatever's in my yard," I said. He laughed like that was a joke and handed me the receipt. I spent the next 3 hours hardening the place, 1 camera on the coop facing ditch, 1 on the grain trailer aimed toward the cedar fence. I ran extension cords and mounted the new flood high under the eave where it could wash the back line. I tied little strips of survey tape along the fence so any movement would show in wind direction. I set a 5-gallon bucket upside down with gravel balanced on top near the weak corner. Old poacher trick. Noisy if bumped. Improvised, sure, but noise buys seconds. Caleb watched from the porch, hugging himself against the rain. "You think it's a person?" he asked. "I think we act like it is," I said. "Lights, locks, no wandering." "That's not what I asked." I tightened a U-bolt until the wrench squealed. "Then don't ask what you don't want answered yet." After dinner, Erin took my hand at the sink, turned it over and pressed her thumb into my palm where splinters sat under skin from the fence post. "You are not okay," she said. "I'm handling it. You're trying to outwork being scared. Work fixes things." She held my gaze. "Not all things." By full dark, rain came in bands and the clouds sat low enough to erase the ridge line. I made everyone keep interior lights off in back rooms so I could see out. At 10:43, the coop cam pinged motion. I checked the live preview on my phone. Static drizzle and bright glare. Nothing else. At 11:02, pasture flood tripped for 4 seconds. Then black. At 11:07, the same flood tripped again. Stayed on, then clicked off, like something was pacing just outside sensor range. I moved into the mudroom with the spotlight and sat on an overturned feed tub. Juno lay under the bench, trembling. The house behind me breathed with sleeping sounds, Caleb turning over, water line ticking, Aaron coughing once. Ordinary noises trying to make this an ordinary night. At 11:31, the back flood snapped on hard. 2 amber reflections hovered at the cedar fence, exactly where I'd seen them before. Not behind it, not above it like branch glare. In line with it, maybe an inch higher than the top rail. I knew that rail because I had just measured it in daylight. 6'1" at that post. The eyes were too far apart for owl, too level for deer, too steady for anything alive I'd ever handled. I thumbed the spotlight and slammed white beam straight at them. They stayed for 1 second, just enough for me to register shape around them, a dark wedge of head maybe, rain sheeting off something. And then both reflections slid sideways and disappeared without dropping. Not blinked out. Moved out in a smooth lateral glide, like whoever wore them had taken one careful step into a slot of black between trees. I swung beam left, right, back to center. Nothing. The fence tape fluttered once, though the wind had gone dead. My pulse thudded in my throat. I tasted metal. Foxfire, I whispered. Wet knot in the cedar. Reflection. Angle. I said it again louder, like volume could make it true. Reflection. Juno let out a low, strangled growl and then peed on the floor without getting up. I stayed on that spot 20 minutes. Beam fixed, shoulders burning. Nothing came back. Finally, I forced myself outside with the light and shotgun and walked to the fence. The mud sucked at my boots. Rain beaded on my neck and slid down inside my collar. At the post where I'd seen the eyes, I found fresh depressions on my side of the fence line. 2 deep, 1 shallow. Like weight had loaded and shifted. No paw edges, no hoof split. Just pressure dents with claw tip punctures at the front. I put my hand beside one. My hand disappeared inside it. Behind me, Aaron called from the porch, voice shaking. "Ray, come back in, please." I looked once more into the trees. They looked back like closed doors. Inside, I rewound the camera feeds. Coop cam showed rain, fog bloom, and at 11:30:52, 2 tiny amber dots in the top left corner for 3 frames, then static. Grain trailer cam caught nothing but a brief flare and digital smear. Caleb stood over my shoulder in the glow from the phone. Now that's eyes. Could be sensor artifact. He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Artifact doesn't make Juno do that. I slept maybe 40 minutes before dawn and woke with my jaw locked and my right hand still clenched around nothing. By breakfast, I was moving too fast, dropping spoons, snapping at everybody for leaving doors open 3 inches too long. Erin set her mug down hard. "You need help." "I need proof." "You have proof." "Not proof anybody else will accept." That afternoon, I drove to County Public Works and asked if they'd had reports of large feral dogs, escaped exotics, anything. The woman at the desk gave me a pamphlet on black bear coexistence. At the feed store, an old rancher told me, "Everything looks bigger at night." At the mill, Harlan barked once when I walked past and 2 guys joined in. Luis avoided eye contact but slipped me a roll of fresh batteries without charging me. By evening, the sky went from gray to a heavy yellow-green storm light that makes every surface look bruised. I finished early, parked my flatbed so its rear faced the backyard, and left it idling for 10 minutes to test how the brake lights lit the fence. Not enough. I repositioned the grain trailer so its white side would reflect floodlight deeper into the yard. I was thinking in beams and sight lines now, not comfort. Rain started again right after 9, thicker than the night before, and fog rose off the ditch so fast it looked like smoke spilling over the pasture. Motion floods turned every droplet into static. You could lose a truck in that kind of visual noise. At 10:18, the New Eve flood triggered and stayed on. I took position at the kitchen window, one hand on the sill, and watched a dark bulk pass between light and grain trailer. For a heartbeat, it was clean as a cutout, shoulders high enough to clear the trailer's wheel arch by a full foot, spine sloping into a narrow waist, head forward on a thick neck, upright in the first frame of my mind, then down into a crouched, four-limbed drive that still covered ground like a sprinting man. No stumble, no bear roll, no dog lope. It crossed from left to right in 3 strides and hit the shadow of the tractor shed like it had been erased. I was moving before I knew I'd decided, out mudroom door, spotlight up, beam searching the shed corner. Rain hammered the hood of my coat. My boots slid in clay, and I caught myself on the coop post where those gouges were, fresh splinters biting my palm. "Hey!" I shouted, because yelling at fear is something men do when they have no better tool. "Get out!" From behind the woodpile came a sound I felt in my teeth before I heard it. Low chuff, then that same dry click of teeth. Not warning, not panic, impatience. The beam found a sliver of shape at ground level. Curve of a haunch maybe, fur matted dark. Then nothing. It shifted deeper into blind angle with a control no feral animal had any right to. I should have fired into the dirt and backed off. Instead, I took 2 steps toward the shed, stupid and furious, light shaking in my hand. Then something hit the other side of the coop wire hard enough to bow it 6 inches and snap me back to sense. Juno screamed from inside the house. Aaron yelled my name. Caleb slammed the porch light on, adding a weak yellow circle that made everything worse. I retreated to the porch backward, muzzle up, spotlight sweeping. For 1 split second at the fence gap, I caught the shape again as it launched. Hind legs tucked, torso elongated, front limbs reaching. Too long in the arms, too high in the shoulders. The arc carried it over the low ditch like it weighed nothing, and then it landed beyond the cedar line without a crash, just a wet thud and brush whisper. Gone. I stood under the porch overhang, with rain blowing sideways, and told myself out loud, big dog with mange, big dog. Aaron had both hands on my jacket trying to pull me in. Ray, inside now. Caleb was white as chalk, staring into the dark with his phone raised like that could do anything. Inside, I replayed what I'd seen frame by frame until the images blurred into nonsense. Grain trailer cam had caught 2 seconds of motion, a tall black form crossing white metal, then static wash. No face, no detail, enough to show size, not species, exactly useless. At midnight, when both of them were finally in bed, I stood in the bathroom with the fan on and looked at myself in the mirror. Red eyes, mud to my knees. A thin line of blood where cedar had cut my palm. I looked like a man coming apart. Sleep deprivation, I told my reflection. Storm light distortion. Adrenaline. I said it again, slower. You're tired. You moved houses. You're running nights. You saw what fear made. From the back of the house, through insulated walls and rain and fan noise, came one faint sound from the yard. Click. I shut the bathroom light off and stood in the dark, trying to decide whether I believed my own voice. I shut the bathroom light off and stood in the dark, trying to decide whether I believed my own voice. The fan hummed. Rain rattled gutter metal. Then there it was again, faint and dry from the backyard. Click. Not branch snap. Not fence wire pinging. Teeth. My body moved before my head caught up. I killed the fan, opened the bathroom door, and listened down the hallway. Aaron and Caleb's room doors stayed shut. House quiet except for Juno's nails ticking nervous circles on the mudroom floor. I padded to the kitchen in socks, kept every light off, and put one eye to the blind slit. At first all I saw was rain glare in the hard white cone from the eve flood. Then a darker shape slid behind the tractor shed, low and smooth. Not fast this time. Controlled. Like it knew exactly where every shadow started and stopped. I eased back, grabbed the spotlight and the 12 gauge, and thumbed the mudroom deadbolt open. Cold air hit me, wet and sharp with that same musk-rot stink. Juno pressed against my calf and trembled so hard she made my knee shake. "Back," I whispered. She didn't move. I stepped onto the porch anyway. Rain had gone from steady to needle-fine, the kind that sneaks down your collar and makes everything slick. I swept the beam left to right. Coop, trailer, ditch, fence. Nothing. I took 2 steps off the porch, boots sinking in the churn I'd made earlier. Then I heard cedar creak. Not wind. Wait. The beam snapped to the coop corner. It was there, half hidden behind the tractor shed, one side of it visible in cut pieces between boards and rain. I didn't get a full body. I got enough. A head turned toward me, long snout slick with water, nostrils flaring wide. One ear stood ragged and split down the rim like old leather, the other laid back tight. Neck fur rose thick and matted, darker than the rest, clumped in ropes from rain and mud. It wasn't black exactly. Black-brown with gray woven through along the spine like wet coyote hide scaled up wrong. My beam dropped to the forelimb braced on the coop post. Not a paw. Too long, too separate. 4 fingers and a thumb-like spur, each ending in a curved black nail sunk into cedar deep enough to bite wood. The grip flexed once and the post groaned. Fresh splinters peeled under its hand. My stomach turned cold all at once. Its chest sat heavy and barrel wide, then cinched back to a narrow waist. Hind legs tucked underneath in a crouch, hocks high, loaded like a sprinter waiting on a gunshot. Everything about it looked assembled out of known parts and built for a purpose I wanted no part of. It opened its mouth just enough for me to see pale teeth too fine and too many in that angle of light. Click. That same impatient tap, this time 6 yards from me. I should have fired. Every hunt instinct I had screamed fire now, make noise, make distance. But my hands locked because firing at a shape like that felt like trying to stop a semi with a fence staple. We stared at each other maybe 2 seconds, maybe 10. Time got strange. I remember rain dripping off my muzzle barrel. I remember my own pulse in my ears louder than weather. I remember thinking, clear as a checklist line item, it is not afraid of me. Behind me, the mudroom door opened and Aaron hissed, "Ray!" The creature's eyes flicked past me toward her voice. Intelligence moved through that glance. Calculation, not startle. It released the coop post, nails scraping cedar in a quick ripping sound, and shifted back behind the shed without turning its body. The way a person backs through a doorway while keeping someone in view? I found my voice in a bark. Inside, now! I backed to the porch, never taking the beam off the shed edge. Erin had Caleb behind her, both of them white-faced. I shoved them into the mudroom and kicked the door shut with my heel. As soon as the deadbolt threw, something heavy brushed the outer wall by the kitchen, low then high, like it stood up and leaned for scent. Juno screamed and launched at the pantry door, claws scratching paint. Caleb swore under his breath and grabbed a carving knife off the counter before I could stop him. "Put that down," I snapped. "It's in the house." "It's outside." I hoped I wasn't lying. We held there in the dark for a full minute, listening. Rain, gutter drip, the refrigerator compressor kicking on. Then from the backyard, receding, came two soft impacts in mud and one final brush whisper through grass toward the ditch. Gone again. I locked every lock, shoved the table against the mudroom door, and sat with the shotgun across my knees until dawn bled gray at the window edges. Erin didn't sleep. Caleb pretended to, and failed. Juno never left the hall closet. At first light, I went straight to the coop post. 4 new punctures sat in the cedar exactly where I'd seen that hand grip, each one deep enough I could bury the tip of a framing nail into them. Below, the wood had been peeled by downward drag marks that measured nearly 5 inches long. On the ground at the base, in mud and splinter mash, I found a print with toe impressions at the front and a separate pressure oval offset like a palm. No bear, no cat, no dog, no prank shoe I'd ever seen. I took photos until my phone battery hit red. County finally sent a different deputy at 9:30. Younger guy, polite, tired, boots too clean for our road. He walked the yard with me, saw the gouges, saw the print, whistled low, and still said, "Hard to confirm species from partial substrate." I stared at him. "Species?" He kept his pen moving. "Unknown large predator activity. Recommend avoid night exposure." "You hear yourself?" He looked up then, sympathy and skepticism fighting on his face. "Mr. Murray, I can't put folklore in a report." "Then put this," I said, and held out my phone footage. The silhouette crossing the grain trailer, the amber dots, the timestamp. He watched all of it twice. "Could be lens artifact and bear overlap," he said finally. I laughed once, no humor in it. Bear overlap. He gave me a card and a line about calling if anything escalated. By noon, word had spread worse than before. Harlan drove past my lane and laid on his horn in a mock howl. Someone from Mill Night Shift texted me a meme of a wolf in a hard hat. I stopped answering all of them except Luis. Luis called once, quiet. "You want me to come sit with you tonight?" I looked at Erin washing dishes with rigid shoulders. Caleb pretending homework while watching every window, and said yes too fast. At 7 o'clock he texted back, "Can't. Wife's dad had stroke. Hospital." I texted, understood, and deleted 6 curses before sending. That evening I brought everything personal in from outside. Boots, tools, dog lead, fuel can, porch chair cushions. Locked tractor shed. Wired the coop corner with spare chain. Left no feed, no scraps. Nothing that smelled like food. If it came again, I wanted no excuse but us. Rain broke around dusk for the first time in days. The yard looked scrubbed raw. You could hear highway noise farther off, and from the mill side the clang of shift change floated up the valley. Normal sounds, almost comforting. Then I stepped onto the porch and felt my chest drop. My work glove, left hand, leather cuff, initials RM in black marker, sat on the top rail of the cedar fence at the exact post where the eyes had hovered. I hadn't left it there. I knew where it had been. Mudroom shelf, second hook. I crossed the yard with my pulse hammering and took it down with 2 fingers like it might explode. The cuff was damp and smelled wrong. Wet dog musk layered over old oil and hay. The glove leather had 4 punctures through the palm, clean and deep, matching that spacing in the post. "Ray?" Erin called from behind me. I turned so she wouldn't see my face first. Too late. "What is that?" "Nothing. Don't." I handed it to her. Her jaw tightened. "Caleb's hat is missing too." "What?" "He left it on the porch chair. It's gone." We searched the yard in full light and found the hat hanging from the coop latch by one torn strap, like somebody had tested the snap and set it back where we'd see it. Not random. Not scavenger behavior. Placement. That night, the camera started sending motion pings in a pattern. Fence line, 30 seconds. Backstep, 30 seconds. Tractor shed, 30 seconds. Then dead for 3 minutes. Then repeat. Like something was pacing a route and timing the sensors. At 11:14, my phone pinged from the mudroom cam I'd mounted inside, pointed at the door. I opened the alert and felt my skin crawl. On screen, inches from glass, was a blurred wedge of muzzle and one green-gold reflection where an eye should be. Not outside the sensor range. Right at the door, looking in. Before I could call Erin, the mudroom handle turned once, slow, deliberate. Tried the latch, stopped. Then, from the porch boards, 3 knocks. Not scratches. Knocks. Caleb came out of his room with a bat and wild eyes. "Dad?" "Back," I said. "Both of you back." We retreated to the hallway and held there with lights off, listening to it move around us. Porch to kitchen wall to bedroom side to back window. Every few minutes a pause, then a chuff against glass, like it was breathing to see if we'd react. By 2 o'clock it had gone quiet. Too quiet. I checked cameras. Static. All 4 exterior feeds black. Power to the house was still on. Only the cameras were dead. At dawn I found why. Each camera housing had been struck from below and sideways, not smashed random, hit once hard enough to spin lens away or crack mount. SD cards from 2 units were missing entirely. Not on the ground, not in housings, gone. I called county again, voicemail. I called Fish and Wildlife. Recording about office hours. I called Jensen, no answer. Finally, he texted one line at 8:12. "Out of county till Monday. Keep lights on, don't bait it, like I had options." By afternoon, I drove into Nolan Creek and asked at the sheriff's substation in person. Desk deputy took my statement and gave me the same language with cleaner wording. No physical threat to human observed. Property damage only. Increased deterrence. When I pushed, his voice cooled. "Mr. Murray, if this is stress-related, we can connect you with services." There it was. The line I'd been dodging. One more push and I'd become the unstable trucker who saw monsters. Lose clearance, lose insurance, lose everything. I signed the paper, thanked him through clenched teeth, and walked out with nothing. The drive home felt longer than it should. Every stand of timber along the county road looked like a blind. Every culvert mouth looked like a place eyes could sit and wait. I caught myself checking mirrors every 30 seconds like I was hauling explosives. When I turned into my own drive, Juno was at the front window, barking in short, broken bursts. Erin met me on the porch, pale, phone in hand. "It was here in daylight," she said before I killed the engine. Not full, not out in the open, but in the trees by the ditch. Juno saw it first. I heard something hit the grain trailer. By the time I looked, all I saw was movement. Caleb. At school. Doors locked? Yes. I did a full perimeter with the shotgun and found fresh marks on the side of my truck cab, just below the driver window. 4 vertical scratches through mud and clear coat down to primer. Too high for dog. Too narrow-spaced for rake. Right where my shoulder sits when I drive. On the back step lay my driver logbook, damp and open. I had left it in the cab pocket that morning. 2 pages torn out, both from my weekly schedule where my haul nights and departure times were written. I stood there with that wet book in my hand and finally stopped lying to myself. It wasn't wandering. It wasn't curious. It was patterning me. By dusk, I made a plan that felt like defeat and called it strategy so I could swallow it. No one outside after dark, period. Keys on my belt. Fuel topped in the pickup and flatbed. Emergency bag packed by mudroom. Flares, med kit, flashlight, spare shells, charger, water. Family in one room if alarms tripped. If anything breached, we ran for the truck and drove through whatever fence we had to. Aaron listened, nodded once and said, "Then why are your hands shaking?" Because I knew plans assume time, and time is what hunters take away. Hunters take. Night came clear for once. No rain, just cold and moonless. The kind of black that turns yard edges into cutouts. Without weather noise, the property sounded huge and empty. Too empty. Even the frogs in the ditch stayed quiet. At 10:06, the first flood tripped. At 10:09, the second tripped. At 10:11, both went dead at once. Not burned out. Killed. House power flickered, came back, then the back of the property stayed black, except for a narrow wash from the kitchen. I grabbed the spotlight and got only a weak yellow beam. Battery full 10 minutes earlier, now drained like it had been left on all day. From outside, near the broken camera by the coop, came that breathing chuff, closer than ever. Then another from the opposite side of the house. I froze. Juno tucked under the table and wouldn't come when called. Caleb stood in the hallway with his backpack already on, like he'd been waiting for this. Aaron had the emergency bag and keys in both hands. "How many?" she whispered. I didn't answer because I didn't know if it was one moving fast or more than one, and either answer was bad. The truck sat beyond the back step, 50 feet of open mud and blind angles away. Front door opened to the driveway, but the nearest neighbor was a half-mile, and my cell showed 1 bar flashing in and out. County road was dark. No deputies, no help. Just us, a failing house light, and something outside that had spent 3 nights learning every lock, every sensor, every habit we had. Another knock came from the mudroom door, soft, almost polite. Then the handle began to turn. Slow. Steady pressure. Not jiggling, not panic. Like whoever was outside knew exactly how much force that latch could take before the screws stripped. Erin made a sound in her throat and clamped it shut with her fist. Caleb stood frozen with his backpack straps in both hands, eyes fixed on the mudroom door like it might inhale him. I could hear my own heartbeat over everything else. I put one hand out behind me without looking. Keys. Erin slapped the ring into my palm. I found the truck fob by touch, thumbed remote start twice. Out in the dark, my diesel turned over hard, one grind, then ignition, and the yard changed color. Red running lights splashed across wet mud from the rear of the truck. A pale spill from the headlights cut under fog, where I'd angled the rig toward the side yard. Engine rumble rolled through the floorboards. The handle on the mudroom door stopped moving. Then came one low chuff right against the glass. I hit the panic alarm. The horn screamed. Lights flashed. That should have sent any normal animal over the fence and into the timber. Instead, a shape rose in the red wash outside the door. For one breath, it filled the window. I had seen pieces before. Eyes silhouette, a hand on cedar. But this time, there was nowhere for my brain to hide. It stood almost man-tall, hunched, then taller when it straightened, shoulders rolling up and forward until its head nearly cleared the porch beam. Fur lay black-brown in wet clumps over a massive chest, with a gray saddle running along the spine, like old ash brushed into dark hide. Water streamed from it in ropes, not droplets. Its head was canine and not canine. Long muzzle, split black nose. Lips pulled just enough to show pale, needle-thin canines layered over heavier rear teeth meant to crush. Torn ears pinned and lifted by turns, tracking us. The eyes hit the kitchen light and returned green gold, reflective but somehow lit from deeper in the skull, like the shine came from behind the retinas instead of on top. Its arms hung too long for any man, elbows low, wrists cocked inward. Hands, ended in curved black claws that clicked once on the top step as it shifted weight. The legs bent backward at the hock like a wolf's, thighs thick, calves rope hard, built for spring. Steam pushed from its mouth in heavy bursts and carried that wet musk rot smell through the door seams. And in the way it looked at me, straight through the glass, then past me to Aaron, then to Caleb, I saw arithmetic, not rage, not animal confusion, selection. I forgot to breathe. The horn kept blaring. Flashers strobed red-white across its body. It didn't flinch until I thumbed the high-beam override on the fob, and the truck lights punched full across the porch. Then it narrowed its eyes, head angling down, and dropped from full height into a loaded crouch so smooth it looked boneless. It launched. "Move!" I yelled. The mudroom glass exploded inward as one forearm hit it. Not through yet, but spidered white in a starburst. Juno screamed from under the table. Aaron grabbed Caleb's sleeve and pulled, but he stumbled on the runner and slammed shoulder first into the pantry door. I hit the mudroom cabinet, ripped the emergency kit open, and came up with a diesel road flare. Cap off. Strike. It hissed alive in my hand. Bright red sparks spitting sulfur and smoke. The creature hit the outer door again. Hinge screws shrieked. I yanked the inner mudroom door open just enough to clear my arm and threw the flare low across the porch. It skipped once, then spun to a stop between us and the steps, red fire vomiting smoke and sparks across wet boards. The thing recoiled hard, not terrified, but offended, head jerking, lips peeling farther back as it snapped once at the flare and pulled away from the spray. That half second was all I got. I racked the 12 gauge. The sound cracked through the house like an axe handle breaking. I drove the muzzle up toward the porch roof line and fired one warning shot over its head. Under the overhang, the blast became a physical blow. My left ear rang instantly, sharp and hot. Plaster dust shook from the mudroom ceiling. The creature dropped and veered right off the step in one explosive bound, claws tearing grooves through the porch edge where it pushed off. Truck now! I shoved Aaron through the door first, grabbed Caleb by the back of his jacket with my left hand and belt with my right, and hauled. Something in my right shoulder tore deep and hot, like a wire snapping under load. I swore and kept pulling. We hit mud. Aaron went to a knee and came up caked to the thigh. Caleb slipped, tried to turn and look back. I slammed him forward. Don't look. Climb. The diesel idled 10 feet away, driver door unlocked from remote start. I threw the shotgun into the cab, shoved Caleb up into the bench seat, so hard his backpack caught and ripped a strap. Aaron scrambled in after him. Juno bolted from the house and launched at the passenger footwell just as I grabbed the door. A dark blur crossed behind me. I dove into the driver's seat, slammed the door, and hit lock. Claws raked metal down the outside of the cab with a scream like a grinder on steel. The truck rocked. Go, go, go! Caleb shouted, voice breaking. I dropped it in drive, floored it, and aimed straight through my own back gate instead of trying to thread the opening. Cedar rails exploded under the bumper. Posts snapped and bounced under tires. We fishtailed through the ditch, climbed out and hit the gravel lane sideways, hard enough to throw Aaron into me. I didn't stop. I didn't check mirrors for the first quarter mile because I knew if I saw it close, I might freeze. At the county road, I swung left toward Nolan Creek and only then looked up. In the rear view, red taillight glare and drifting dust framed the broken fence line. It stood there pacing the gap we'd made, backlit by our own porch light and the truck's fading lamps. Not chasing, not retreating, just tracking us with its head, step for step, until distance swallowed it and the dark took everything back. The all-night fuel stop by the mill sat under sodium canopy lights so bright they flattened color out of faces. I pulled under pump 3 at 12:58 a.m., killed the engine, and kept both hands on the wheel because they wouldn't stop shaking. My shirt was soaked through with rain and sweat. My palms were full of splinters from that coupe post and porch rail, tiny burning needles under skin. My right shoulder had gone from hot to numb to grinding pain every time I lifted my arm. My left ear rang with a high electrical whine that swallowed half the sounds around me. Aaron touched my forearm. Ray, we're safe. I nodded once and couldn't answer. Caleb stared straight ahead, jaw locked, mud drying in streaks on his cheeks. Juno crouched on the floorboard, panting fast, eyes huge, refusing to step down even when I opened the door. The night clerk, Manny, came out in a reflective vest, carrying a mop bucket he didn't need. He looked at the busted fence slats wedged under my bumper and the bloodline drying on my wrist. You roll it? He asked. No. He waited for the rest. I had none to give. Sit inside, he said finally. I'll get coffee. Under the canopy, everything smelled like diesel, hot brakes, and burnt sugar from stale donuts. Normal, industrial, human. I clung to that. I took one sip of coffee and spilled half of it down my shirt because my hand spasmed. Manny pretended not to notice and set napkins down like we were discussing weather. Aaron cleaned mud off Caleb's knuckles in silence. Every time headlights swept the lot entrance, all three of us looked up at once. At 3:15, when truck traffic picked up for mill shift, I called dispatch and said I had a family emergency and would be out indefinitely. No details, no promises. At 4:02, I called county non-emergency and reported property damage and hostile predator activity. The woman on the phone asked if anyone had been bitten. I said no. She gave me an incident number and told me an officer could meet after daylight. By dawn, I looked like I'd been in a rollover, without a wrecked vehicle to prove it. Mud-caked boots, torn sleeve, bruised hip from the cab edge, shoulder hanging weird, one ear half dead. Aaron kept looking at me with that expression spouses get when they're doing math about how close they came to widowhood and hate the answer. When the eastern sky turned from black to washed-out blue, I drove us not home but to Luis's place outside town. He opened the door in slippers and took one look at our faces. "No questions," he said. "Come in." At 9:40 a.m., I met a deputy in the sheriff's substation parking lot instead of at the house. Same office as before, same laminate counter. Different man, same smile that never reached his eyes. "What happened?" he asked, pen ready. I gave him exactly what could live on paper without ending my livelihood. Unknown large predator damaged fence and attempted access to residence. Family evacuated by vehicle. Property damage significant. No direct physical contact. He looked over his glasses. Unknown predator? Yes. Bear? Could be. Cougar? Could be. You discharge a firearm? One warning shot into safe direction. He wrote, paused. Any substances involved, Mr. Murray? Lack of sleep can... No. My voice came out flat. No substances. He gave a little chuckle like we were both in on something. We've had folks out your way get worked up on internet stories. Dogman, skinwalkers, all that. Stress does strange things in the dark. I kept my face still and signed where he pointed. I didn't mention the hand on the coop post. I didn't mention knocks at the door. I did not mention the way it watched us leave and didn't chase. I did not hand him the audio file on my phone with the chuff and the teeth click outside my mudroom at 11:14 p.m. Because if that became the story, I was done. CDL medical review, employer concerns, insurance flags. Pick one. In my line of work, possible hallucinations can bury you faster than bankruptcy. And bankruptcy was already waiting if I lost night hall income. I filed an insurance claim for broken fencing, camera damage, and door replacement under wildlife incident. Adjuster accepted photos, paid partial, and told me to install better deterrents. Like this was raccoons in feed bins. 3 days later at the mill yard, I sat on my tailgate with my phone and a thermos, staring at the audio waveform but not hitting play. A shadow fell over me. It was Leonard Tye, old logger from the Warm Springs side, retired from felling but still doing contract road checks. Gray braid, yellow slicker, eyes that missed nothing. "You're Murray," he said. "Yeah. Heard you had trouble at Nolan Creek." "People heard a lot." He held out his hand. "Show me what you heard." I played the porch clip. Rain hiss, Juno whining. Then the chuff, close and deep, and that dry click. Leonard listened once. No reaction. Listened again with his eyes closed. When it ended, he handed the phone back and looked past me toward the tree line above the chip piles. "You were warned to leave that tree line alone at night," he said. "By who?" He shrugged one shoulder. "By now." "You know what it is?" He looked at me a long moment. Knowing a name doesn't make you safer. Then before I could ask more, "Don't send me copies. Don't post it. Don't feed people's hunger for stories." He walked away toward his truck and never looked back. I sat there with the phone in my hand and felt more alone than I had in the house. The first thing I sold was the chickens. I loaded crates in daylight at the co-op yard, while the buyer, a woman named Carissa with feed dust on her boots, counted birds and made small talk like this was any normal Tuesday. "You getting out of poultry?" she asked. "For a while." "Foxes bad out there?" "Something like that." She handed me a check and paused when she saw me scanning the tree line behind the loading dock every 30 seconds. "You okay to drive?" she asked. "Daylight," I said. "I'm fine in daylight." I wasn't, not really. But daylight was rules and angles and witnesses. I could function inside that. By the end of that month, I moved the cattle lease to a pasture closer to town with better sight lines and neighboring houses on two sides. Cost me more per head and cut my margin thin, but I could not keep stock backed against that cedar line anymore. I called Cascade Timber Dispatch and told them I was dropping all-night routes, taking only daytime farm and equipment deliveries. Dispatch laughed first, thinking I was negotiating. "I'm not available after dusk," I said. "Ray, night shifts are your money runs." "I know. You can't just decide you're a daylight guy." I just did. The pay cut hit like an axle drop. We canceled vacations we weren't planning anyway. Sold an old quad. Delayed roof repairs. Aaron picked up extra bookkeeping work remote for a feed supplier in Salem. Every dollar got assigned before it arrived. At the house, I spent weekends hardening what I no longer trusted. Steel fencing panels along the back 40 feet. New posts set in concrete. Industrial floods on poles high enough to wash the ditch and fence together. Thermal cameras with battery backups and locked housings. Motion alerts to both my phone and Aaron's. And still, when sunset hit, I did not step into that backyard. Not once. If a tool got left out, it waited till morning. If a gate chain clanged at 9 p.m., it stayed unclanged. I'd stand inside the mudroom with my hand on the knob, heart pounding, and choose not to be brave. Bravery had almost killed us. Erin believed me fully the night she sat at the kitchen table with headphones and played the porch audio 10 times in a row, each time turning a little paler. On the 7th play, she pulled the headphones off and said very quietly, "That is not a bear." "No." "Why didn't you tell the deputy?" I looked at our bills spread between us, because truth doesn't pay lawyers when they pull my CDL. Truth doesn't feed cattle. She closed her eyes. "I hate that you're right." Home got rigid after that. I checked locks 3 times. I checked camera feeds every hour until midnight, even on nights we stayed in town. If Caleb left a curtain open, I snapped at him. If Erin stood on the porch after dusk to take a call, I dragged her inside and we fought in whispers so the neighbors wouldn't hear. Caleb took it hardest in ways he wouldn't admit. He stopped going to friends' bonfires if their yard opened onto woods. During soccer away games, he refused fields with dark tree lines behind the goal. For months, he slept with noise-canceling headphones and rain sounds blasting so he wouldn't hear house creaks and mistake them for knocks. One night, I found him sitting on the bathroom floor at 1 a.m., lights on, headphones around his neck. "Can't sleep?" I asked. He shrugged without looking up. "Every time the fridge clicks, I think it's teeth." I sat down across from him, shoulder aching in old weather. "Me too." At work, the split got clean. Harlan and his crowd kept at it. Howls in the yard, Dogman shift jokes, fake paw prints on my locker. I stopped laughing along, then I stopped showing up where they were. The 2 who didn't mock, Luis and Dana, our oldest shop mechanic, became my only people at the mill. Luis checked in without prying. Dana quietly helped me wire a relay, so my camera backup stayed on if house power flickered. No speeches, no theories, just practical help. I trusted that more than sympathy. 11 months after the night we ran the gate, our lease renewal papers came. I set them on the table. Erin looked at me. I looked at the backyard cameras on my phone. 4 green status dots, no motion. Midday sun on empty mud. "We're not staying," I said. She nodded before I finished. We moved to a smaller place closer to town on a short lot with chain link fencing and streetlights and neighbors close enough to hear you sneeze. Less land, less privacy, more noise. I loved every bit of it. The last thing I did before handing the farmhouse keys back was walk to the back fence in full noon light and set my palm against the cedar post where those claw gouges had first appeared. Weather had darkened the scars, but not erased them. I did not look into the tree line. I turned around and left. Now it's been 4 years. I run a modest daytime farm operation. Hay contracts, small equipment moves, seasonal hauling when the roads are clear. I'm home before dusk by rule, no exceptions, no just one more load. If a job can't be done in daylight, it can wait or somebody else can take it. People call that stubborn. I call it survival math. Our current place sits 10 minutes from town, 15 from the mill, and far from cut-over timber corridors. Backyard is short, flat, and lit from 3 angles. I installed steel posts anyway, 2 thermal cams, 1 flood on a photocell, 1 motion triggered, both on battery backup. Redundancy on redundancy. Dana helped design the layout. I paid him in elk meat and cash. Every night at 8:30, I do the same check. Locks, camera feed, truck keys, charger, flare kit by the mudroom. I keep a hardbound notebook on the counter and log every unexplained sound like a driver's logbook. 2117. Alley cat on west fence. Confirmed on cam. 2203. Wind gust. Trash lid impact. 2341. Unknown. Thump near gate. No visual. Reviewed twice. Erin says writing it down keeps it from owning me. She's right. Sort of. I still wake sometimes at 12:17 exactly, throat dry, hearing that first night chuff in my head, like it's in the room with me. On bad nights, I stand in the kitchen, blinds cracked, and watch the fence line until the clock flips to 1 o'clock. Juno's gone now. Old age, 2 winters back. But even at the end, she never chose a bed near a back door. Caleb's in college in Eugene. He jokes more now, sleeps better. But when he visits, he checks door locks without being asked and chooses the couch where he can see both hallway and back window. Some habits seed deep. Do I know what it was? No. I know what it wasn't. It wasn't a dream or stress or a bear that learned to knock. I had my hand on the gouges. I smelled it through glass. I watched it make decisions. I've had people ask for the footage, for the audio, for a podcast interview, for just the details. I tell them no. Leonard was right. Feeding hunger for stories doesn't make anyone safer. Most of them want a monster tale to pass around a fire. I already paid the cost of one. What I got in return was not answers, it was boundaries. Dark behind a fence is occupied territory until proven otherwise. Routine is not obsession if it keeps your family alive. And sometimes, surviving means accepting that you can tell the truth and still never be believed. Tonight, like every night, I'll lock up before full dark, mark the notebook, and sit where I can see the cameras without staring at them. If the wind hits the chain link just right, it makes a soft tapping sound that used to spike my pulse. Now I write it down and breathe through it. I have not seen that thing again. I plan my whole life as if that could change.